Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Pulse by GRESB, a new audio series focused on ESG sustainability in the real assets industry. I'm Tyler Guthrie, Director of Communications at GRESB, and I have with me Charles Van Thiel, Director of Real Estate. Hey, Charles.
Hey, Tyler, how are you?
I'm doing really well. How are you?
Very well, thanks.
Good. So today we are here to talk about residential real estate and its relationship to the GRESB benchmark. Charles, can you set the scene for us and tell us a little bit about the history of residential real estate within GRESB and what portion of the benchmark it represents?
Absolutely happy to. So I think if I can go back in time a little bit, all the way to the inception of the real estate assessment, really back to 2010. I think it's fair to say that the real estate assessment was initially developed with a primary focus on commercial real estate, meaning the majority of the assets back then represented in the GRESB benchmark were mainly in office and logistic and retail. And it's been the case for several years post inception of the assessment. However, if you actually look over kind of the evolution of those proportions over time, an interesting trend to note is that the proportion of residential asset reporting to GRESB on an annual basis has been consistently and steadily increasing, growing over time to eventually become the biggest single sector in the benchmark in 2022, representing approximately 36% of the benchmark right now. So I think it's fair to say that those proportions have changed, and obviously the dynamic have changed, meaning that the priorities have changed in terms of development of the assessment.
Yeah, that's really interesting. So basically now we're in a new benchmark, a new year where residential real estate really needs to have a little bit of a specific focus from GRESB Foundation, which is what we'll talk about in a moment. But there's some changes coming around the corner this year in terms of residential real estate within the assessment, correct? Can you tell us a little bit about what those changes are?
Yes, so the first changes of the real estate assessment relating specifically to the residential sector are in fact in the 2024 assessment. And these changes mainly relate to solving some of the technical and operational issues faced by large residential participants, such as some large residential assets at times do have multiple energy ratings attached to it, whereas this reporting scenario was not properly catered in the real estate assessment before. So there was only one energy rating per asset previously. And as from 2024, the real estate assessment will allow multiple energy ratings to be reported for large residential assets. That's kind of the first thing that you see in 2024. But of course, there'll be many more changes in 2025 and beyond.
Okay, that's fascinating. So really important changes to really reflect the needs of the residential sector in real estate. These changes are being driven by the GRESB Foundation. Can you tell us a little bit about how this process has happened, what the GRESB Foundation is, and how these have come to light?
Yes, of course. So in general, when there is something that is, a certain limitation observed by the industry or something that requires more development, there is a lot of industry feedback that GRESB receives. This really started on the residential front a couple of years ago, which is why GRESB then conducted an industry-wide survey at the end of 2022, aiming to really, gather much more feedback from the industry and formalize a bit what are the current limitations relating to the residential sector within the assessment. And that really has resulted in good outcome and a clear need from the industry for the assessment to better cater for the residential sector in the future. And so that has really been acknowledged by the GRESB Foundation, which has formally approved a plan for the real estate assessment to better cater for the residential sector in the future. And this plan essentially started already in 2024 with the changes that I described earlier. So solving some of the technical and operational issues faced by large residential participants. But a lot of work is currently happening in 2024, aiming to review topics currently covered by the assessment that are deemed potentially immaterial or not fully applicable to the residential sector. Think about green leases or tenant fit out, things that usually residential landlords don't have much influence or control over, as well as developing new ESG topics, specifically material for the residential sector, but currently missing from the assessment. So in short, it is a multi-year plan that started crystallizing in 2024, but that results in a lot of work already this year with an aim to impact the 2025 standards, but 2026 and beyond standards will also be impacted by some more developments on that front.
I see. Okay. And the GRESB Foundation is represented by the industry itself, right? So what would be some of the opportunities for someone who wanted to get involved or have their voice heard? What would they do?
Of course, so as a quick reminder, the GRESB Foundation is an independent governance body who owns the legal decision-making authority over the GRESB standard. It's approximately 45 individuals, industry representatives covering all regions and sectors of both real estate and infrastructure. And it composes three main committees, and the committee that is responsible for maintaining and developing the standard is called the Real Estate Standard Committee, or the RESC. And the Real Estate Standard Committee, of course, heavily relies on the direct input from the industry in order to inform the necessary development work stream for the standards. And that can be done via, industry working groups. So the GRESB Foundation regularly runs industry working group that offers the opportunity to industry members to be involved and to contribute and to share knowledge. But that can also be done via different channels, such as taking our survey, dedicated interviews, or simply informal meetings with GRESB. So a lot of opportunities to be involved, particularly at the end of 2024, the GRESB Foundation will be running an industry working group on the residential topic, where a call for application will be shared with the wider industry in mid-2024, allowing the wider GRESB membership to apply, to contribute.
Oh, great. That sounds like a great opportunity to give back. Speaking of which, so taking a step back, what does this big body of work on the residential side of the assessment have or suggest in terms of the direction of travel for the GRESB standards as a whole?
Yes, that's actually a great question, because we've been talking about residential until now, but you can almost see residential as the first step towards a much, much bigger overhaul of the real estate assessment in the future. At the moment, what we're doing with residential is essentially introducing some of the differentiating factors between sectors in the assessment, something that we've never done before. Up until today, GRESB has always proposed a one-size-fits-all approach to the industry, and has been extremely effective over the last 10 years, because it's essentially proposing a simple and consistent and quite, comparable approach for the whole real estate sector to assess ESG performance. However, we're observing that the real estate industry, from an ESG perspective, is getting to a level of sophistication that requires more than a one-size-fits-all. And with the work that we're doing on residential, we're essentially introducing sectoral differentiation in the assessment, starting with residential, because residential is certainly the most different sector compared to others. But you can, of course, expect this kind of mechanism to, in the future, apply to other sectors. Think about data centers, think about retail, logistics. The meaning of ESG itself differs and depends based on the real estate sectors that's being assessed. And this is something that will be more and more reflected in the assessment in the future.
Oh, that's great. Yeah, that's really interesting to hear. So lots of change happening now, lots of change potentially in the future. Can you tell us a little bit about where people could go to find more information on the specific changes and also the long-term roadmap of those standards?
Of course. So I'm going to refer you to two key documents if you're interested in understanding more of the changes in the short term that will impact GRESB participants. I'm inviting you to read a document that's called the 2024 List of Changes for the GRESB Real Estate Standard, that really explains the rationale and the impact of each change impacting the standard. But if you're looking for something a bit more high level, but also forward looking, at the end of 2023, GRESB released a document called the Strategic Roadmap for the Standard. And it really sheds light into the general direction of travel of the standard, that provides a lot more detail about what I just mentioned, which is, introduction of materiality consideration in the standard, further differentiating residential versus other sectors, as well as other factors that really drive the direction of travel of the standard, such as the transition of the standard to better assessing and rewarding performance, et cetera, et cetera.
Fantastic. All right. Well, that is about as much time as we have today. But Charles Van Thiel, thank you so much for joining me on The Pulse.
Thank you to everyone for listening.